Well, everybody, we are back today, and we have Mr. Brett Woodburn with us. Brett, how are you?
Good, Nick. How are you?
I am good. Thanks for asking.
Good.
Heather, how is your car in downtown Philly?
It's better because I'm not sitting in the title office anymore. So
Yeah, yeah. It was funny when I told Brett, I was like, Heather might be late or need to back this up. She's having a nightmare of a settlement. He goes, well, you had one today too. I was like, yeah, but it wasn't a nightmare. Mine was a cash deal. It was easy. Closed. Done. 3 minutes.
no,
Everything's signed.
this one has. Let's just say it's over, and that's all that counts.
That's all that counts. And I'm sitting here
All that
rocking
counts.
my, can't advertise that too much though.
Oh,
So
Jesus.
it is no surprise to the real estate industry with all of the changes that have happened that we are bound and determined to finally talk about it. And that is the change to the Pennsylvania forms that we use as realtors. So for those of you that don't know this, PAR, the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, creates forms for us as members. It's a benefit to us that we don't have to pay for, which is absolutely phenomenal. So they revised their forms with all the changes that have happened due to the NAR lawsuit. And now we are going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into today, just the standard agreement of sale, and the changes that happened with it. And here's the caveat that I want to give you guys is none of what Brett is saying is legal advice to you. If you need to get legal advice, I will give you his personal cell phone number. You're more than welcome to call him at 3 a.m. But you, if you want to do certain things with this, remember that unless you have a license, a law license, you shouldn't be practicing law, and you shouldn't be making changes to forms without your attorney's blessing, your broker's blessing. The next caveat that I really want to make here, guys, is whether it's good, bad, or ugly, the forms that PAR does create for us are absolutely phenomenal. It is an amazing benefit to us, and it is something that you don't get elsewhere. So are they going to be perfect? No. Are they going to fit every single situation? No. Are they damn good? Yes. They are great for what we have to do every single day. And you can always make changes and add things in and take things out that work for you, your brokerage, and your business. So I feel like that
With
covers
that
all.
being said,
So,
Want
Brett,
we rip off the Band-Aid?
let's rip off the Band-Aid, the good, the bad, the ugly, with what the settlement has done, what our PAR form has ready for us, standard agreement of sale. What would be the first thing you would say one of the changes are that people need to really actually better understand? Because I know the one that I want to point out.
Well,
well,
let me just.
specifically, is it paragraph 3?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Heather won't get away from that. It's paragraph 3.
paragraph 3.
No,
Uh,
I want to put it out there. It's paragraph 3 we're talking
it
about. Let
is.
people be able to go right to it.
Yep. Go right to it. And if you have the current color coded one, it's bright red. And I want to echo what Nick said. It's not a secret that I've been critical of some of the changes. I think a lot of people out there, some people out there, have been mischaracterizing my criticism as being malicious or some other way, being as trying to be demeaning or devaluing to PAR, to the task force that worked on this into the final product, and nothing could be further from the truth. These are invaluable tools for realtors, and it's a great benefit, and it's a great service. And the changes that were brought about by this settlement were both minimal. The changes were minimal, but the consequence or the impact was significant. And the task force that was appointed, they had a monumental job in front of them, and it was and probably didn't have enough time, and maybe bit off a little bit more than they could chew by doing a little bit more than was mandated. And when that happens, and I've been in that position before over the years, that's um, when you don't get the best product the first time around, but you put something out there. And I think that um, I've talked about these forms a lot over the last month or so. It's probably been 15 or 20 times where I've been in to brokerages and associations and teaching CE courses on this. And I've got a session. I did a session for the Allegheny County Bar Association. I've got another bar association that's asked me to come out and talk about these forms. Heather, out in your general direction, Delaware County, and Old Republic Title Insurance Companies asked me to put on an ethics session for the title agents dealing with the changes of these forms. So I'm talking about it a lot. And paragraph 3 of the agreement of sale is the big time hog, right? That's what's taking up all the time. And that is the most common area of concern, confusion, and misunderstanding that I'm hearing about any of the other changes that were made out there vis-a-vis the forms. And I think that the confusion, the wording has created confusion. And I think that the first area of confusion is the actual title of paragraph 3 is seller concession. And that's because paragraph 3 doesn't just deal with seller concession. It deals with seller compensation and seller concession. Because the first paragraph, 3A, is talking about what fee, if any, the seller is paying to the buyer's broker on behalf of the buyer. That's what 3A is, right? It's irregardless of, in addition to what any listing broker might be paying to the buyer's agent. Paragraph 3A is the seller is going to add to that pot. If the listing broker is paying 0, whatever the seller is adding to 0 is what the buyer broker gets. If the listing broker is paying something, and I'm sorry, I don't talk in donuts. I can't do the food thing. I talk
But
in
you
big
could.
numbers.
You could
Yeah.
talk in donuts.
Then I just get hungry, Heather. And what I talk about is I talk about big numbers, and I talk about big numbers so that nobody thinks I'm suggesting what things should be,
We
right?
can
I'm
talk
not.
about
Right.
Dobermans.
We get yes, and shattered coffee tables. So so for example, and I think where the problem is, if we look at the words, in addition, the first phrase, in addition to any compensation negotiated between the brokers, that tells you what that's talking about, right? That's an offer of compensation made from a listing broker to a selling broker to the buyer's agent. That
because it's still
has
legal. You can
correct.
still do that.
Always have been able to. And in fact, I think it's important to note that this paragraph A was actually is a very, very well done synthesization. Is that a word? Certainly shortening of what was once an addendum to the agreement of sale, because a seller has always been able to pay part of the buyer broker fee directly, and there was a whole addendum for that. And the task force went and they really shortened it in paragraph 3 and did largely a very good job with it. But now it says, in addition to any fee, any cooperating compensation, and I gotta say, I hate the word cooperating in there. In addition to any compensation negotiated between the broker, and here's where some of the confusion comes in, using the cooperating broker compensation agreement or via some other agreement. What's happening across Pennsylvania is agents think they have to put in paragraph 3A the number that is on the CVC.
Right, because they're not reading.
They're even when they are reading, they're not understanding.
RDR.
Yeah, RDR, realtors don't read, but it's a more of a confusion because they now think, and why do they think this doesn't matter at this point? We're at the point where we need to correct the misunderstanding. So, and I've had these conversations. I've had them with brokers all over Pennsylvania. I had one yesterday, and it was an interesting conversation because let's use big numbers because numbers make sense to me. They had a broker that offered $20,000 or 20%. The broker offers 20%. Listing broker offers 20% to the buyer broker, and then the buyer agent puts 20% in paragraph 3A. And
they're now getting 40%.
Well, so now that was the question that was asked. The title company, the broker, asked the title company to flag it. They have they have an own title, wholly owned title company. The title company flagged this, and they reached out to the listing broker and said, "You understand that in addition to the 20% you're offering, your seller is also offering 20%. It may have been a mistake that the buyer agent made, but that's what it says." And the listing broker argued with them. That's not what it says. And finally, they went with what you just suggested, Heather, and they read it. Here's where it gets interesting. The buyer agent didn't make a mistake. The buyer agency contract was for 40%. And the buyer agent wanted to get the 40% or whatever the real numbers were. It doesn't matter what it was.
Oh my God.
So I've heard a lot of brokers say, all right, we understand that this is difficult because a lot of people think, a lot of brokers think this, a lot of agents think this, a lot of managers think this, that we should be duplicating what's on the CBC in paragraph 3A. No. All right. So if we see a number, if we have a CBC and we see the same number in the agreement of sale, then we just understand that the buyer agent made a mistake. No. You might have a smart buyer agent that thinks that the listing agent is not going to read the offer closely and understand it and intentionally ask for twice or
more money.
3, 4, 5, whatever, doesn't matter, an amount in addition to what the listing broker is offering. And so I've been talking to a lot of agents, and I've been explaining that there have always been, for the last 25 years at least, there have been in Pennsylvania 4 ways that a buyer broker can get paid. For 25 years, there have been 4 ways, and there continue to be 4 ways. Number 1, the buyer broker can get paid by the buyer. Number 2, the buyer broker can be paid by the listing broker. Number 3, the buyer broker can be paid by the seller. And number 4, if there's a seller concession, the buyer broker can get paid out of that pot of money as well. And all 4 can exist in one transaction. So, I can have a deal, Heather, if I'm the buyer's agent where, you're the buyer, right? And you're paying me 10%, and Nick's the listing broker and he's paying me 10%, and the seller pays 10%. We get a seller concession. I get another 10%. I got my 40%. And that's okay. But because that's not the way we've always done it.
Right.
And by what has consistently come through from the agents and brokers, it's by referencing using the cooperating broker compensation agreement or some other agreement. That's the phrase they don't understand. Why is it in here? Now we have to put that in this paragraph. And when they get that it doesn't have to be in that paragraph, their next question, and I know we're not going to talk CBC today, but their next question is, well, because it's here, does this mean I have to add the CBC as an addendum? And when it says it can't be an addendum to the agreement of sale, what am I supposed to do? Because the agreement requires me to make it part of the agreement. So the phraseology, while when we stop and we sit back and we read it, we understand exactly what it makes sense. It is conceptually well written. I think the idea is a solid idea. I like it. I like the fact that in addition to whatever the listing broker has agreed to pay the buyer's agent, the seller is willing to pay this to the buyer's agent on behalf of the buyer. I think the concept is solid. I like it. I like it a lot. But that paragraph 3A has taken up, it took up a solid hour in a CE course that I taught, because agents, and there were some really smart agents in that room, and they were all struggling with it. So beyond not reading it, and, we went through that part, but beyond not reading it, they really were struggling with the language. So, and rolling into paragraph 3B, and why I think the title to 3 is hugely problematic. So 3A is compensation, 3B is concession.
Mm-hmm.
And a big fear that I have for where this results of the settlement might take us has to do with concessions and agents now using concession as code for compensation. For 25 years, agents blended the idea of cooperation with compensation, which is why I've really been working hard over the last several months to stop talking about cooperating compensation. In my opinion, there's no such thing. there's compensation, and that cooperating compensation concept is what led to the lawsuit and the verdict in Missouri. There is an equal risk now, and I'm seeing it, where concessions are being used to convey compensation. And I was on one of the webinars that NAR had out there where it was Matt Troiani and Deanna Romerowitz at NAR were talking about adjusting to and making the changes. And this was just days before. It was, I think, on Thursday before. What would that have been? Saturday was what? The 17th, I think it was Saturday. So this would have been the 15th.
15th.
And one of the things that Matt said, if he said it once, he said it 5 times, is, realtors need to stop putting their energy to finding a workaround for the compensation offers not being in the MLS to focusing on complying with that. That is a big, big deal. And
Yes,
so
I would agree.
I mean, I'm concerned. One of the concerns that I have is that, everyone's talking about, oh, DOJ this and DOJ that. I'm not that I don't respect the threat that's out there. DOJ, yes, we know DOJ wants to decouple, the word of the year, right? Decouple. They want to decouple the seller side from paying the buyer broker fee. DOJ doesn't want sellers to be able to do it or listing brokers to be able to do it. They want to separate it all together. There hasn't been any overt movement in this settlement yet, and my concern is DOJ is waiting to see what realtors do with concessions in the MLS. And I mean, I'm aware of a situation, whether or not it was in Pennsylvania, I won't say, where listing broker, they had their in the MLS, and this was pre-August 17, fortunately. But in the agent remarks says, I'd love to show you this property. Give me a call. It'll take me 2.5 minutes to get there. Now, that quickly got flagged. It went up the flagpole, and they said, you can't do that. Well,
but what if it really did only take 2.5 minutes to get?
Yeah,
Just kidding.
that was his
Just
response.
kidding.
What if it really does only take me that long? I'm like, look, yeah. So
I know somebody who's making signs to put on the kitchen counter.
That's okay.
I
don't care about that.
You want me to show you my sign? It's shaped like a house.
It's really cute, actually. I said, where do I order these?
Yeah.
Although I'm still waiting for my coffee mug.
But to kind of get back to the agreement of sale, you've got paragraph 3 that's called seller concessions. You got 3B, which is concessions, or in other words, seller assist. What for 25 years we called seller assist, and stuck right in the middle now is the seller paid compensation. And so the paragraph 3 is now structured in such a way to facilitate agents conflating concession and compensation. And I think, and
so,
go ahead.
So I mean, and so for full disclosure for everybody, I sat on the task force for these forms.
Oh, we're saying that out loud.
Oh, I'm saying it out loud. I mean, for true transparency, I did. I sat on the task force along with several other bright-minded individuals, and dealing with the changes that
like
were
most of you.
The changes that were coming down from NAR, which, so just people understand, it was a consistent, almost daily check-in to make sure, did something else change today? Did they come up with a new FAQ? Did something get misinterpreted that we have to reinterpret in some other way? And I'll be honest with you, this is one of those things that when it got out there into practice, I guarantee none of us, and maybe I can't say none of us, a majority of us didn't see coming, didn't see the mix-up coming. And what happens, PAR has been known to change forms if so need to happen, et cetera. We don't know. We'll see what happens after September. But they're listening. PAR is listening to what's happening on the street with how people are practicing and what's happening. Sometimes it's also a matter of practice where, again, this is something people have not been doing before, because we'll talk about the CBC, but even the language in the CBC changed, which some people had to wrap their mind around that because it was before, now it's a should, So there's that as well. I have actually seen agents who have done it properly, so I am starting to also see people catching on.
Correct.
an agent reaching out to me. There was an agent who had signed CBCs in the house,
Fully okay.
already sitting there. There were, ones where the buyer's agents have said, "Hey, I sent you a DocuSign. Hey, thanks for communicating that. Here, I've sent it to you to sign and send back," and vice versa. Again, this is something we have not had to do before, that we're starting to learn going through the process. So, Brett, I understand your points, and they're well taken. And you are correct. It's not alone on it. There have been several people who have mentioned it, but then there are also several people who are like, "Oh, now I get it," and have corrected, and it's a conversation, like going over the agreement of sale with a client of mine. We got to that point, and there was an agent who was looking for more, cooperative compensation. Excuse me. And, we opened up the dialogue. We opened up the dialogue and talked about it. So it's interesting.
I think the other thing that a lot of people are forgetting, though, is that, look at how many times over the years the SPD has had to change, or the Brett's favorite form,
Seller's
the appraisal
property disclosure.
contingency.
Stop using your acronym.
So how many times all these other forms have had to change, that we can expect that. And, the committee meets again in September at the Hilton. Anybody that is a Realtor member is welcome to come and be a part of that feedback panel, ask their questions, get their feedback out there, so that then the following day, the committee, I think it's following day, or is it later that day? I don't remember which, but it's either the following day or later that day. Then the committee meets and they discuss the changes that potentially need to happen.
Yeah. But that's the whole thing. I get your point, Brett. I do. And you are right. It is confusing. Some agents aren't getting it, but I don't know.
Another area of confusion in that paragraph that has come up under the 3B and I would like, and I've had a number of people say this, that they, when I say I'm kind of conveying what my clients have said to me, is that if 3B is meant to be the old seller assist, can we just use the old seller assist language? And it's pretty close. But the area that I've gotten the questions on is the language that says other than brokerage fee payable to broker for buyer. And the way people are reading that as, and I think it reads this way, is it's saying that you cannot use seller concession or apply it to buyer broker commission. And I don't think that's what the intent was, but that's how the language of it is oftentimes being read. And the thought was, well, if you just take that out, other than broker fee payable to buyer, then you've got almost exactly verbatim. And I don't think there's any question that you've always been able to, and you're still able to use, you can use your seller concession towards the appropriate closing costs, which include the buyer broker fee. So the question has come back, or people say, well, why don't we just go back to the old language for seller assist in that paragraph? And that's kind of the feedback that I've been getting on that, when they understand. The problem is, you guys both know this, right? You're at the top of the industry. You guys have been super involved at all levels, the local level, the state level, and to some extent even, at the larger level, at the national scene, with being active in the industry. And the people, Heather, that run that task force with you have been leaders in the industry, some of them for decades. In Dominic's case, for decades upon decades upon decades.
He said it.
He
said it. Wasn't
so
me.
You're, and I remember being in those rooms for many years, and you get the tunnel vision, right? Because you're all talking, you all understand. And sometimes, you get the brightest minds in there talking, and you come up with some great ideas, but sometimes you forget that the people that use the form aren't the brightest minds. And
no, they are bright. They're bright. I'm going to defend them on that one.
No,
but
yeah. It's so we used to, many times I've heard the reference to the LCD Realtor, the lowest common denominator, and the person who is not necessarily a part-time agent, but the person who is not active in all. They don't come to the brokerage meetings unless they have to. They're just getting the continuing education that they're required to get, and they're just out there doing their own thing. And that's it's a dangerous agent that does that, whether or not they're a realtor, because they're not staying on top of things. And so, and again, look, I think that what you and your colleagues did, Heather, with the forms, by and large, was a great job, as always. It is a great tool. And the thing is, if everything was done perfectly, then we would be talking about something different today. But there's always discussion, and Nick's right. The forms are always,
They can always
not
change.
always. Many forms change. I mean, the agreement of sale changes regularly. The seller's property disclosure form changes regularly. The CBC
they have to grow and
never
adapt.
changed. Yeah, the CBC was created in 2004 and never changed. So here we are, and you as you collectively as a task force, we're dealing with a much larger, impactful change than the industry had seen since 1999 when buyer agency came on board. So, the extent that I or anybody else is critical of the forms, I hope that it's not being taken personally by the members of the task force, because it certainly isn't intended as a criticism of the quality of work that was done. Now we've got the end product, and now we got to talk about what we need to do. Is it okay the way that it is, or does it need to be modified to be workable? It's that practicality. I've learned, and many of you know that I worked for many years with Jim Goldsmith, and one of the lessons that that he imparted to me, took a long time, though I finally accepted it as true, but is there's being right, and then there's getting the right answer, and the practical outcome. What do we need to do in order to make the result? And I think that's what I do. My approach, if I'm doing title, right, what do we need to do to get the deal done? I don't need to be right. I need us to get the deal done. And I think that's kind of the criticism that I've been hearing from a lot of knowledgeable people has not been, why did PAR do this to us? How dare they? Damn PAR! Let's get out the pitchforks and the torches. It's been, okay, this is what we got, and we got some big changes, but these aren't working for us because our agents just don't get it. And that's kind of where that's kind of where you get it out there. And the challenge here, of course, unlike most changes, consequences, if there were any, for misused forms or misunderstood forms, if there were any consequences, were limited to the transaction. Unfortunately for the industry, this is a result of a national lawsuit, and there really wasn't the opportunity to quote unquote test drive any of these forms. Instead, the urgency and the panic level is a lot higher, and the pressure is a lot heavier.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a conversation to have with your broker, with your manager.
Absolutely.
Make sure you understand them, or legal. If you are a broker or manager, talk to your legal counsel. Obviously, always submit any feedback that you have, or how you're using the forms, or how you're interpreting the forms to PAR. You can actually go on their website as a realtor member and fill out hey, I saw this and it would be better if it was used as such, or vice versa. A lot of people, unfortunately, they don't come directly to PAR and let them know, but there is fortunately people like Brett and Nick and myself and others who listen to people and then bring that back and are the voice, who bring it to the table. But as
as a
user, right, but as a user, I want to make sure everybody understands that they too have the power to submit, to the legal hotline or to PAR, hey, listen, I'm using this form and I don't think it's working because, or suggestions, etc.
Realtor members.
And who knows? Yeah, realtor members. Yes. Yeah. And of course, the realtor members should be taking questions that they're getting from their client, not as, oh, they don't understand, but if that's how they're interpreting it, maybe, it needs to be changed or something, and always bring that back to PAR as a realtor member.
And I think the only other thing I would add to that is, yes, Heather's statement there of, talk to your broker, and if you're a broker, talk to your legal counsel. As an agent, it doesn't hurt to have that conversation with your legal counsel as well. And you should have somebody that is a go-to person, just so that maybe something that your broker told you is incorrect. They're not perfect either. And then you can go back and say, hey, wait a second. This is what I'm hearing from my attorney. Is this correct? Should we be looking at this another way? And that is the beauty of this industry is it is a self-policing industry. So I feel that way also when it comes to stuff like this. You have to have those communications and those conversations to be able to put people in check to make sure that everything is working the way that it is meant to physically work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point. Great spot. Good information, crew. Good
obviously, we have a lot more of these forms to come at you guys. That's actually not true. There's only a few others that really changed, because in Pennsylvania, we were already doing a lot of the stuff that was required based on the lawsuit. So, that is one thing. As a Pennsylvania agent, you should be proud to know that the state and your associations were already well ahead of the threshold, I guess we'll call it, that that was set in place with this, where other states, they didn't even have buyer agency. They didn't talk about it. They didn't understand it. So we were already well ahead. I was not around for that. These two were. But so I just get the benefit of knowing that it is because I spend time with old people.
I mean, Heather, in her defense, was 15 when this happened.
Thank you. I'm 26 now, and that happened, well over 26 years ago. And I've had my license for almost 30.
Copy paper.
Really? I wouldn't have thought you had your license for that long.
I've had it since 1996.
Jesus.
Wow. I thought you had to be 18 to get your license. How'd you get that exception?
Exactly. We're just going to leave it at that.
Well, as always, guys, it's been a pleasure.
Always good to talk to you guys.